Hey Nerf Herders, I'm Addy Thomas.
And I am Ben Milton.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Certain Point of View as we explore the Star Wars galaxy together. Today we are going to do a little bit of a roundup of some news. We've been doing comics, we've been having guests, which has been really awesome. But in the course of that, there have been a couple things that have happened in the Star Wars world, and we haven't had a chance to really dive into them as deeply as we'd like to. So we're going to do that today. But before we do that, I want to remind you can go to our website, certainpov.com, and find all of the other podcasts that are part of Certain Point of View there, including Another Pass, Fun and Games with Matt and Jeff. We've got Reignite. We've got the Scruffy Nerf Herders, all sorts of different podcasts within the nerd world and nerd universe. You can find them at our website, certainpov.com. And also, while you're there, be sure to check out Maria Monzone, who is a supporter of this podcast, and she's my Liberty Mutual insurance agent, and she can help you get a great deal, and you can help, you can find her on our website as well. She helps with a variety of types of insurance, auto, home, renter's insurance, life insurance. All of that is available on our website. You can just find her contact information there by clicking on support on the support section. So be sure to do that, because not only has she been a great help, but on with this podcast, but she's also someone who's gotten me some great deals and has helped walk me through that process and made it abundantly clear and gotten me some great deals. So be sure to check that out. All right, let's get to the Star Wars. So ton of stuff has happened. Sadly, well, not this past weekend, but the previous weekend, we heard about the passing of Gary Kurtz. And he is he was the producer on the original Star Wars. Well, he was a producer with Lucas on American Graffiti, Star Wars, and Empire Strikes Back. And he had a little bit of a falling out with Lucas. So he's kind of not always been someone who's sort of like LucasFilm history has sort of revised him out of the picture a little bit. But it's undeniable that he has always had a major, major part of that original Star Wars trilogy. And it's sad to hear that he wrapped up a battle with cancer at the age of 78. And Ben, do you have? Well, I mean, Gary Kurtz is sort of an interesting person.
Yeah, I don't think that we can talk about Star Wars without talking about Gary Kurtz. Really, I mean, Lucas gets all the headlines, but in my mind, Gary Kurtz was just as instrumental, and if not, he was critical to the success of Star Wars out of the gate. That you wouldn't have had modern Star Wars without Gary Kurtz reining in some of Lucas's ideas and focusing them. He was absolutely brilliant and an amazing storyteller.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things is I kind of explored the making of Star Wars, which is funny because the lore of the making of Star Wars is almost as expansive and divisive as the lore of Star Wars itself. And I find Kurtz is such a fascinating figure in all of that, because you have everything that complicates, Star Wars, the original trilogy especially. Like, leave out all the drama of that's currently happening with the sequels, and all the drama that's happened with the prequels as well. But the original trilogy, I mean, you had like all the different influences on like all the people who helped make the original happen. All the re-edits and things that refined the movie. Kurtz helped. Was a big part of being like working with some hostile crews in London that wouldn't listen to Lucas. He was a big part in bridging some of the lack of people skills that George had at that time, refining the Force into kind of the version that we have today instead of something that could have been a whole lot more complicated. And sort of like just kind of the magic of the collaboration between Kurtz, Lucas, and Kirshner, and how that kind of all came together to make Empire is such a fascinating story. It's such a shame, honestly. I always think it's a bit of a shame that there was that falling out. Because man, I still, as much as I love Return of the Jedi, I absolutely love Return of the Jedi. But Return of the Jedi, I still, as much as I love Return of the Jedi, I absolutely love Return of the Jedi. 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 I still wonder, like, what would have Return of the Jedi been with Gary Kurtz on it? What could the prequels have been? What could have the sequels have been if Gary Kurtz had a hand in making those? Because I really like it would be such a fascinating, like that's an Elseworld story right there, you know?
Absolutely, yeah, because you Lucas, for as brilliant as he is, needed somebody to rein him in and ground his ideas and focus his ideas. And I think, when you look back at the prequels, there's plenty of reason to kind of say like Lucas needed somebody to say, no, this isn't a great idea. He just had too many people who were just enamored with the idea of it being Star Wars and him being George Lucas. At least that's like when you watch the behind the scenes things, that's how it really comes across.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether or not that's reality, I don't know. But based on what we're able to see, that's certainly what it looks like. And you're right. It would have been interesting to see a further collaboration with those two guys and seeing what could have been and what we would have gotten out of it. We'll never know. Well,
and I think it speaks to this whole idea of like, film as a collaborative medium, and the fact that, you can have two very talented people work together, but that doesn't mean that that's going to create great art. You do sometimes need the right people to work with each other. And I think Gary Kurtz was definitely one of those people who really worked well with George, especially on the first two movies.
Yeah.
And of course there were things that complicated that, but that's the nature of relationships and life. But I think Dave Filoni is one of those guys that really worked well with George on the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's clear that those people exist. It isn't that, Lucas is a terrible guy and he just, he wants to run over people with his emotions and his ideas,
No.
But, sometimes you do need just the right people around you, like workplace cultures that, like, I think people underrate that. Like, there's no, like, some cultures are right for certain people and some aren't, There's something about like a small staff that I really like, but there's also certain things about being part of a big organization that some people fit in better in a place like that,
Yep, personalities and what you're looking for play a huge role in that, and and it certainly did for Lucas too. And I completely agree with you. I mean, I'm not shitting on George at all. I think he did an amazing job. I think he was a brilliant man, and still is a brilliant man and a great storyteller. But when you're talking about film and you're talking about a collaborative process, who you have is just as important as how many you have.
Right.
Getting the right people, like we used to say in the radio station that you and I worked at, like getting the right people on the right seats of the bus is really important. Like, you don't want to have like a super creative person doing accounting. Like they're not going to be good at that. So, he was clearly the right man for the right time. And you're right. It is kind of a shame that it didn't continue to go on, and George didn't seem to have that for a long time when it came to making movies. I think you're right. I think he found it with Filoni, with Dave Filoni. But again, like the three prequels were already out, and it was kind of too late, and it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. So he's definitely a huge part of Star Wars lore, and a huge life. What an amazing man.
So, in other news, not quite Star Wars, but sister company, obviously, we'll occasionally talk about stuff that's not Star Wars on this podcast. And the MCU is a sister company. Right now, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is a sort of a sister company with LucasFilm as part of the bigger picture that is all of Disney as it grows to take over our world. But the MCU had some interesting news lately. Obviously the movies always have something developing, but with the new Disney Play service that's coming in 2019. We know that we're getting Jon Favreau's TV series, and I bet Resistance will probably end up moving to it. And there'll be other Star Wars series as time comes that will find its way onto that platform. And we also have heard of some other plans as well, but we hadn't heard much on the Marvel front. We know that Netflix has a couple different properties. The Defenders. We got Daredevil and Iron Fist and Luke Cage and Jessica Jones and the Punisher all there. But we know that those guys are going to stay there, and they've been let. Kevin Feige has let go of all of them. But we have now heard that rumors that we're going to get MCU miniseries. So we're going to get basically movie-level miniseries on the direct-to-consumer platform from Marvel, overseen by Kevin Feige, not Jeff Loeb and Marvel TV, but the actual Marvel Cinematic Universe, potentially with miniseries focusing on secondary characters like Loki or Scarlet Witch. Maybe we'll get something with War Machine, all sorts of characters like that with the actors who play them in the MCU. So, what is sort of your thoughts on this, Ben?
I mean, mixed emotions. I'm excited about it because I want to see that. I mean, it's fantastic, and I think it also opens the door for Marvel to do some really, not Marvel, but Star Wars to do some really interesting things on that platform as well, to tie in the movies and give us more long-form storytelling than just the movies. But I really like Marvel Netflix, and it feels like a little bit of an FU to Marvel Netflix.
Yeah, I can't get past that. I'm excited for this. Don't get me wrong. I love the MCU. I love what they do. I also feel, though, what they do is going to hit a certain tone and is not necessarily going to maybe
scratch a new itch.
Yeah, and Marvel Netflix scratches a different itch than the MCU does. In the same way that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. does. And, didn't scratch anything for me, but, Inhumans potentially could have as well.
But Legion does.
Yeah, Legion does. But Legion isn't... Well, Legion is... Let's leave the Fox properties out of it for the moment. Those are totally... Those are a crazy animal of their own. Who knows how those get integrated in, The Gifted and Legion and all of that. So right. the X properties, and I mean, who knows what's going to happen with Deadpool in this picture. But it feels really weird to me because for the longest time, we know that. They've been very coy about saying, oh, could Daredevil show up in an Avengers movie? And, at this point, they've gone ahead and pretty much said that it's not going to happen. But then, right. There was also news that Kevin Feige doesn't particularly like the Netflix movies or straight up hates them. And who knows, that's just people talking and maybe just extrapolating that out from nothing. But it sure does feel that way when it comes to moments like this, and I get it. The MCU is one of the most profitable properties out there right now, and it makes sense to put your best foot forward from there. And Marvel Netflix is a little bit up and down depending on the series that you're talking about. So I get it. But part of me feels a little like what does this mean for all those guys on Marvel Netflix? Will they?
Well, I mean, we know what it means. They've already said they're not introducing really anything new to that universe. It's just going to run its course and
well, does that mean are they going to wrap them up? What does that mean? How much more time do we have with them in this universe? Do they reboot them over in the MCU side eventually?
Probably. That's or are they just going to? Is that they'll wait? Well, I don't know how long the deal with Netflix is. That's really going to be the determining factor. I don't know how long, what the agreement between Marvel and Netflix is. I know they said that there's possibly another Defenders, but it's going to be a changed lineup. It's not going to be the lineup that we've already seen. I don't know what that means. Does that mean that we're just are we going to... Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. The social media accounts for the Defenders have all been converted into a generic sci-fi fantasy Netflix account, basically, where they just highlight all the sci-fi fantasy properties instead. So that seems a little weird.
Yeah.
It almost feels like there won't be more Defenders.
I don't think so. I think they're going to wrap up. I mean...
do we really need it either?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
and
I'd
the
like
thing
one
is, like,
more
you
team up.
have aging actors, and then you have rising production costs because every time one of these guys or girls does one of these shows and signs a contract, like the price goes up, right?
That's
So
true. Yeah.
eventually, like, it just kind of prices itself out, and it isn't really doable anymore.
Yeah.
Although Netflix doesn't seem to be short on any kind of money, but even then, like, you know, they're getting older. You
Yeah.
know,
That's true. That's true.
uh,
So yeah, one
there's a
last hurrah for
possibility.
Daredevil, and then
Well, yeah,
we'll
and
see
that's what it
from
looks
there.
like. Like, we know we're gonna get Kingpin back in this new season of Daredevil. So I feel like that wraps up his arc. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I need some wrap up for Luke Cage. Although, if you ask me, don't give me Luke Cage season 3 or Iron Fist season 3 or Jessica Jones season 3. Like, let's see what happens out of this Daredevil series, but let's have all their stories wrap up in a final Defenders storyline. You know, like maybe get like now that Luke Cage is now the boss in Harlem and is evolving into his own sort of kingpin. Like they got to take him down or they got to figure. I don't know. Like there's something there.
Yeah.
Maybe it's.
I
Just
think
time
they
to
have a
wrap it up.
plan. I think they have a plan, and I think they know where they're intending to go with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like they're just making it up as they go, and
That's true.
I don't buy into the theory that Feige hates the Netflix shows.
Yeah, I can't believe that either.
I think it's a great place for those stories to be told. I'd like more stories to be told. I'd like to see like a Morbius. I'd like to see, I got to see Punisher. I wouldn't mind seeing more of Punisher. I wouldn't mind a Punisher season 2. But yeah, like as far as the Defenders go, I would like kind of like a wrap up of all of their stories at this point.
Yeah. Well, let's move on. So, sticking in the Lucasfilm Disney sort of world, Kathleen Kennedy has got a new deal. She's got her deal with as president of Lucasfilm renewed, actually all the way through 2021 right now.
Right.
I added a few more years to that one. I added 3 years on top of that, but she got a 3-year extension. So, at this point, she's going to continue producing as the chief of Disney content for Star Wars. And, this is coming at a time where there's been a lot of speculation about how much time she has left with Star Wars, and there's a lot of fans who, or at least a lot of vocal fans who feel she isn't doing a good job with Star Wars. And to some extent, some people, like with the lack of performance on the part of Solo, some people seem to say that the writing was on the wall for her to be out. Personally, I'm happy that is not happening, that she is still part of the Star Wars universe, that she is still part of Lucasfilm. I think there are a lot of people who are very ignorant and are talking a lot of crap about Kathleen Kennedy, but don't really understand the process or her role in that process. And you can have your problem with Story Group and all those other parts of the Disney version of Lucasfilm, but I think there's a gross misunderstanding of what that is. And I also think that a lot of what people who are not Kathleen Kennedy fans, what they don't like about Star Wars right now, would have happened even if it was outside of her hands as well, if someone else was producing it. I think that's the nature of Hollywood right now, is what they're having a problem with. But Ben, what are your thoughts on this?
I was not surprised that she was or signed an extension. And that they signed her back. I did not think that there was much of a chance that they would kick Kathleen Kennedy off of Star Wars just because Solo didn't meet expectations.
Right.
But I think there's plenty of reasons, and we've gone round and round about why Solo didn't perform well as far as we're concerned. What does kind of surprise me is the length of time of the deal that she signed. It's only a 3-year deal.
Yeah. It's a short time.
That's a short term. When you're talking about making movies, each movie takes 1.5 years, 2 years to make, right? Like
a lot more than that.
Well, yeah, from writing through pre-production to actual production and then editing. Like, yeah. So they didn't give her a long leash. You know what I
Right.
mean? It wasn't like they gave her like a 10, 15-year deal or anything like that. And that could just simply be because she didn't want one. She is getting older. I mean, she may be thinking about retiring herself at this point, you know?
Yeah, she's been in the industry for a long time.
Yeah. And I don't think she needs the money.
Right.
So the length of time of the contract is a little, like, kind of tells a story to me that either it's simply because she didn't want to sign a long-term deal, or because she's thinking about retiring, and so they said, okay, we would love to keep you. How long can we keep you? And she said 3 years. Let's do 3 years. That's entirely possible, and that's highly likely. The other
do you think she's grooming someone behind her?
I would hope so. Any good leader does, right? And I think Kathleen Kennedy is a good leader. The other possibility is that they said, look, this is, one of our crown jewels. We have the MCU and we have Star Wars. And you just had not a great film with Solo, and there's a lot of turmoil and unrest in the Star Wars community. We're not kicking you out, but let's see what you got. Let's just, like, we're going to give you a short-term deal. It's kind of like in football when you have, like, the wide receiver who, he gets busted for drugs and, on a contract extension year. And they're like, well, we'll give you, however, many millions of dollars, but we're only signing you to a 1-year deal to see how it works out. Right, that way we're not on the hook for 15 years of having to pay you all this money. It also kind of has that sort of feel to it. It all, and I don't know which is true. I really don't know which is true. I want to believe that it's just because, Kathy is thinking about, hanging it up and passing it off to somebody else. Maybe JJ is going to take over. I don't know. Or Filoni. I know a lot of people would love to see Filoni take over. I like Dave where he is and doing what he's doing, but I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him run the whole thing. Or maybe there's some, a third party that we don't even know about that could step in and take those reins and make it work. But it is a short-term deal, which is kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on from that. So the Hollywood Reporter had an extensive interview with Bob Iger, since Disney's in the news for a lot of different reasons. Star Wars being, and the MCU being as powerful as they are right now. Disney's new streaming service, Disney Play, coming next year, and the acquisition of Fox, and also some recent firings that have happened within the world of Disney, from ESPN to, Roseanne on ABC to James Gunn. All sorts of different things that are talked about in that article. One thing in particular that jumped out at me was sort of Bob Iger is taking responsibility for the performance of Solo based on timing. So
yeah.
I'm in the school that believes that the timing of Solo was the issue for its performance, not really. I mean, sure, there are other factors that contribute to it, but I think the timing is the biggest factor of them all. And that seems to be what Iger is contributing some of its performance issues to, is the timing as well. He mentions a potential slowdown in Star Wars movies. I have some thoughts about that, but Ben, we'll start with you.
Let's hear. All right. Well, I have thoughts too. I don't. You don't hear about a slowdown in the MCU, right? Like, there's not a slowdown in the MCU when, like, name a, I guess I can't think of a movie where they've missed enough where it would even be considered. So it's a little concerning to me that they're overreacting a little bit to Solo. But maybe they're judging. Maybe they're taking a good look at the box office and saying, realistically, there's just not enough demand to put this much money and to release a Star Wars movie every year. Personally, I mean, obviously we're huge Star Wars fans, so of course I want a Star Wars movie every year. I want multiple Star Wars movies every year, like the MCU gives me. Like, I want 4, like I get from the MCU, and I want other just like Marvel Comics, I want other places making Star Wars films too. I want Fox making Star Wars films. I want, I want 15 Star Wars films a year, and I'd be happy. But it's not going to happen, right? Like,
right.
And there's good reasons for that not to be happening. I'm assuming like they've done their research and whatever, and just said, hey, look, the demand isn't there yet. Maybe we need, we jumped the gun and assumed that it was there just because of the name Star Wars, and certainly there was a lot of buzz when it came back with JJ, and then it's faded since then. To be honest, like I can't deny that the excitement for Star Wars has faded since we saw The Force Awakens.
Yeah,
I don't know. It is what it is. Like, it's not like. Part of me is a little upset. And the other part of me is like, yeah, but we're getting a new Star Wars TV show from Favreau. We're getting a new Star Wars TV show from Filoni. Like, there's going to be plenty of Star Wars to watch. It's not like they're like, all right, well, Star Wars is dead. It's not like the Universal Monster Universe, like with Tom Cruise killed. It was like stillborn. Like, we're still going to be getting... We're still going to be getting Star Wars stories, so I can't bitch too much, And honestly, at this stage of my fandom, the movies aren't my favorite way to take in Star Wars anymore anyway, so I would rather have TV shows. So,
right.
What about you?
I'm kind of at the point where I'm just hoping they don't take the wrong lessons from Solo. Because I want at least a movie a year for sure. I may want eventually more than one movie a year. Here's the thing, though. The MCU didn't initially do that. It kind of had to feel its way and figure out, okay, what's working and what's not. Thor 2, not so great. Thor 3, they hit, pure gold. So I think Star Wars, they need to kind of do the same thing as well. What do people really want out of Star Wars? What variety of tones can you do in Star Wars? If you want to build it MCU like, you're gonna have to vary the tone up. You're gonna have to have your, you're gonna have to have your Star Wars adventure films, your thrillers. You're gonna have to have your, action comedies, maybe maybe you have your romantic comedy as well, maybe you have your story of like, of an artist who has, drug addiction. You can get into the Cantina band and their backstory and what happened, how they got there, and maybe that was their last great performance. You never know. I mean, you have a massive universe when it comes to Star Wars, and I think there are enough worlds and characters and time frames, not just the Galactic Civil War, not just the Skywalker era, that's important to Star Wars. One thing they keep on teasing in a lot of these is some bigger threat. That Thrawn at least is aware of, that's on the horizon. I'd love to find out what that is. That's still kind of in the same era, but there's the Old Republic. There could be far in the future. There's so much that you can do in the Star Wars universe, and I'm excited to see what happens with all of that. Mm-hmm. But for now, on Christmas, I love the idea of Star Wars at Christmas. Like I'm a little disappointed. Like, I was just thinking about, all right, what's coming out this Christmas? And, there's a new Fantastic Beasts movie that's coming out in November, which I'm not a huge Harry Potter fan, but I like Harry Potter, so I'm looking forward to it. And then we've got Aquaman, and sure, I'm going to go see it. I'm still hoping DC somehow finds its stride. But knowing that the last 3 years I've had a Star Wars movie at Christmas and that there won't be one this year, I almost kind of feel like the Grinch one a little bit.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
It is a hard pill to swallow because Star Wars for so long has been sort of Star Wars and Star Trek have been like the pinnacle of nerd movie culture.
Right.
Like that's where it's at, and it feels like, oh god, like the MCU has kind of surpassed that now, and it's like, oh, I don't want Star Wars to wane. But on the other hand, I completely agree with you. I think I think you're absolutely right. I think they have to kind of follow in the MCU's footsteps of re-earning their place to a movie a year.
Exactly.
And I think they can do that. I think they will do that. I think it's just a matter of them just putting the pieces together. And I think like once we finally wrap up this last trilogy of the Skywalker saga, like once that burden is over of not having to tell the final chapter of that story and it opens up the universe to everything else, Star Wars will be in a much better place. I think
right.
The burden of having to wrap up Luke and Leia's and Han's story is like it means so much to so many people that I think in some ways like they're a little constrained by that. And I think once that's done, you'll be able to breathe some new life into Star Wars and go in some really interesting directions. So we'll see. We'll see what happens, or it's going to fall on his face.
Well, right. Well, one of the interesting new directions isn't necessarily traveling new story, territory, but it is traveling a new medium, and that's going to be Vader Immortal, the VR series that's going to be coming to the Oculus Quest next year. And so this is something I'm sure if you've listened to the podcast for a while now, this is something I've talked about every now and then. I believe we talked about specifically after our Star Wars Celebration 2 or 3 years ago when they first announced this, and they had the smallest teaser trailer for it. And this is one of those things that I got crazy excited about. I'm not a VR fan. In fact, I don't think I've actually ever really played much with VR, to be honest. But I'm fascinated by this new medium and what it means in terms of storytelling, because David Goyer was hired, and he's been a part of a number of different nerdy franchises as a writer. I think he wrote some of the Blade movies. He collaborated with Nolan on the Dark Knight movies, and there are a number of other ones, some better than others, but he definitely has a solid resume in the nerd world, and he was hired on to create this 3-part series, Vader Immortal, and the first part is expected next year on the brand new Oculus Quest, which is the first wireless VR set. It's going to be about $400, which made me cringe a little bit inside, because I don't know if I'm really crazy about spending $400 for a new platform.
Well, here's the thing. Like we run a Star Wars podcast and we're building this huge nerd podcasting community. So I'm really hoping at some point in time it starts paying off with some
Patreon guys.
Not even Patreon, but with some of these companies noticing us and sending us some free swag.
Oh, that would be so nice.
Yeah. So that's the dream right there. That's really why I'm doing this, is
right.
for the free swag.
And eventually private screenings.
Yeah, I think at best we can hope for is maybe like we each get a T-shirt about this game, probably.
Oh man! But so this game or story, because it's basically ILM X Lab is sort of spearheading this new medium, like how to tell stories, and it's not really games, but a story, how to handle storytelling in the VR world. So this story is going to be an encounter with Vader on his castle on Mustafar, and it's going to be, I believe it's between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. It's the same castle that we saw a glimpse of back in Rogue One. So it'll be. I'm very fascinated to see what this story is like and what it means, because what's very fascinating about some of the press on this is the discussion is what Goyer says about like just the kind of playtesting they had to do and the way it stretched them as writers to kind of write something for the VR space, that isn't like writing for TV or for movies. And I'm fascinated to understand what that means.
Well, it's interactive, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so of course, with movies and TV, it's passive. Like, we just sit there and we watch. We're just like a silent witness to what's happening. With VR, you're there. Like, you have the opportunity to interact with characters and be a character yourself. So, I mean, that absolutely changes the way you would tell a story, wouldn't it?
Right. But it even seems different from the way you would do that in video gaming. It seems like video gaming is the closest to it.
Right.
But,
right.
But even then, like, video gaming still has the ability to lock your focus on something or on certain moments in interesting ways. I'm fascinated to see what that means for this story. Like how do they get you to focus on certain things and still be aware of the world at large in those moments, and how that affects your perception of the story? Because I think ultimately that's the thing is, perception of a story, even in movies, your own experience affects your perception of a story that's told to you. So when you add more creative freedom into storytelling, like when you read a book, you create your own images of what those characters look like and sound like and how everything feels. What with the level of control that you have in VR, where do you have that sort of freedom to create in it as well, with your imagination? I'm interested to see how that interacts.
I think that all depends upon how, as time goes on, how advanced AI becomes. And being able to interact with the story that way. We'll have to see. I mean, it looks cool, but I have very low expectations for this, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
because it's very new. It's a very new technology, and it's the first attempt at storytelling like this. So I'm not expecting much out of it. I'm interested. I'm super curious. 400 seems like a lot of money to drop on something like this, but who knows? It may be amazing. But again, my expectations are pretty low.
Yeah, for sure. Also recently, John Kasdan, who was a co-writer on Solo: A Star Wars Story with his father, Lawrence Kasdan, he tweeted out 52 notes or Star Wars facts on Solo: A Star Wars Story. And, I was excited to read stuff like this because I love sort of the insight into the process and the storytelling process and sort of that honesty of like, okay, you hear some ideas that we had that didn't make it, but this is sort of how we got to arrive to some of the ideas that did make it, and different inspirations and influences and stuff like that. So I love when someone shares that kind of information because it also tends to inspire me to go on and check out like other stuff, like, oh, these are the things that influenced this story. Like, I'd love to go and check out what influenced it. So what were some of your sort of big takeaways from the Kasdan tweets?
I was really interested in the stuff they were talking about with Kira, and the tie-ins to some of the other characters that we were going to be seeing. Some of the other characters that had like very minor mentions or whatever, but it was going to like really expand the universe out.
Yeah, like some Ithorian antiques dealer apparently is someone we should remember.
Yeah.
I thought it was very interesting that Kasdan also, like you mentioned with Kira, this is the first and second acts of her story with Han. That the third act is untold, which is obvious from the movie. Not quite what we expected, but I do really hope that we get a follow-up to it. Not necessarily as a Solo 2, but as a Lando movie or as, I don't know, something more generic underground that Alden Ehrenreich Solo can appear in, but may not necessarily be the focus on. Or I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily need a Solo 2. I'll take a Solo 2 for sure, but if you got to do it from someone else. Yeah, but if you do it from someone else's perspective in that, there were a lot of really cool characters in that story. Lando, again, is someone I'd love to see his story. I think the way you do a Boba Fett movie or a Bounty Hunters movie is to do that. The thing that crushes me is I love how much John Kasdan loves Bosk and how much he was fighting to get Bosk into this movie, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, I knew that would be your sticking point because there is no greater Bosk fan than you,
right?
I mean that would have been very cool. But that movie was so packed with references with.
But the way he wanted to use Bosk was very fascinating and interesting, and I think would have been cool, and would also be a cool way to introduce Chewie's greatest rival, his arch enemy. Is like, I mean, because in a lot of ways, this movie was Chewie's movie. You know, like you should introduce Chewie's arch rival. So.
Yeah, I would like to see that. I would like to see that story told. That movie probably wasn't the place for it.
No,
but I would like to see that story told.
Yeah, exactly. So, outside of that, actually, the thing that most fascinated me was when he mentioned what was Lord and Miller's influence in the movie and some of that stuff that made it there. Because that was one. I think that's something we talked about. Like, will we ever really know? Like what was the Lord and Miller stuff, what was the Ron Howard stuff, what was the Kasdan stuff, that I thought was fascinating. Like that he, despite sort of the drama on set, that he talked about some of the stuff he really liked from Lord and Miller, that made it into the movie or may not have, but sort of the process of it. I thought that was really cool. Like the whole the scene in the pit with Chewie was sort of the kind of tone that Lord and Miller had for that movie, which I thought that was great. I thought it was good stuff. I still like the Solo movie in the form that it's in, despite all the different drama it had to go through, but I thought that was a great scene. So
yeah. I hope at some point in time somebody leaks that script and we can kind of see what it was like. That would be cool.
Yeah, that would definitely be. So, well, last but definitely not least, we're going to be talking about Star Wars Resistance. We've had a couple trailers over the last couple weeks, and by this time next week, we will have already seen, I believe we should have seen, may or may not have seen, the premiere for Star Wars Resistance. But we got a couple promos for him. We got a promo introducing us to sort of the main cast of characters on Team Fireball, but then the Team Aces and some of the other characters, some of the side characters, and then a bigger story sort of trailer as well. And we're getting some innocent, some family, some fun characters. There's a huge cast of characters for this series, I have to say. And it's really fascinating because Poe and we know Poe and Captain Phasma are in this series and are voiced by the actors in the movies. We're getting Oscar Isaac and Gwendolyn Christie voicing their characters, and I'm sure they're going to have passing. They're not going to necessarily be the driving characters, but we're getting to see Kaz and the other characters that are surrounding him. Who and what are you most excited about right now with this series?
I don't know. I'm reserving judgment. I'm excited about the series. It looks fantastic. It looks super fun, but I haven't really identified with any of the characters yet. I am most interested on Team Aces of the old TIE fighter pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And because his ship looks dope as hell. It's just like a modified TIE fighter, and he's still wearing some of his old gear, and it's all worn out and ratty and stuff like that. Like he looks interesting to me, but he's also kind of a stereotype of like the old grizzled veteran who's got one last fight in him. So I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's hard to tell with these shows and what we've seen in these sizzle reels of who I'm gonna like when I remember when Rebels came out and seeing Ezra, and I was like, yeah, not really feeling Ezra so much.
Oh, of course. I don't think anybody was. Even Kanan, I think people were a little with Kanan too. Yeah, but I ended up loving all of those characters in their own way. Even I love Chopper. Chopper's like my favorite droid. I don't
I don't know. We'll have to see how like what they actually are. You know, it's a sizzle reel. It's just it's highlights and it's real broad and it's just designed to get you like, oh, okay, that, you know, try the widest possible net they can throw out there to try and get garner views. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I have high hopes. I have super high hopes and high expectations. I know I'm kind of coming off sounding like, man, whatever. But like when you're talking, like, I don't know who my favorite character is going to be. I just don't.
Oh yeah. Well, I wanted to see who jumped out and resonated with you. For me, I'm surprised we haven't seen who Bobby Moynihan is voicing just yet. I'm excited. I'm interested to see who he voices. I kind of like in the Team Fireball. I can't remember his name. The actor, or I know the actor was on Silicon Valley, so I'm kind of like, oh, I'm kind of interested to see what his character turns out to be. The guy who's always an optimist, seemed sort of like a fun character and seemed like one of the bigger characters. Team Aces though, I am hyped for Hype Phase On. So, I
have mixed emotions about that character.
I know you do. Well, tell me what your mixed emotions are, Ben.
I'm a little put off by the idea that he speaks common.
Yeah, a Rodian,
Rodian
who
speaks common. Yes.
Yeah.
Other than that, I like the idea of it, but I love listening to the Rodian tongue. Like it makes me laugh. Like I kind of want that, and I kind of want subtitles, and I kind of want like misunderstandings of like, what is this guy saying? But instead, we're getting like this street savvy sounding.
Well, not even street savvy. This like super arrogant, pompous.
Yeah. I mean, I like the character. I would just like it.
The new version of Gary the Stormtrooper. You know.
Yes. I would just like him to actually speak Rodian, but you know, whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be perfectly honest, it's because it's Donald Faison that I'm excited for the characters. So I'm excited that he's in the Star Wars universe. Because I remember even watching one of the Q&As for Rebels, for the finale for Rebels, and he was in the audience. Like he is a true diehard Star Wars fan. So it's kind of cool seeing that he's been able to make his way in there into the Star Wars universe. So I'm excited for that. Story wise, you know, one of the things people have been a little critical of is, you know, oh, it's family fun, friendly, like racing type of story, and there's a little bit of the spying storyline. The last trailer definitely sort of brought out a little bit more, I think, established a little more clearly the bigger picture of this. I do think that the majority of it is going to be a little bit lighter and fun, especially for this first season. But as we have seen for Clone Wars and as we saw for Rebels, it doesn't take long for them to start getting a little darker and into the bigger picture of everything. Like, I do think the First Order is going to be intimidating, and we will start seeing more of the nature of the First Order. I mean, like, they've already started talking about pirates being a bit more well coordinated and funded in the teaser itself. So I do find that very fascinating for the origins of the First Order and how they arrive on the scene. And it makes sense when you like that the New Republic would have necessarily taken them as seriously in that kind of world. So I'm excited to see how the series evolves. I can't wait for the first episode, but I'm not expecting something crazy dark or, you know, or anything for that first episode. But I'm looking forward to it. So we'll see how we'll see how this unravels. I've yet to, you know, here's the thing, you know, people are going to always be hesitant on something that's new. I, for one, love the art style. It's very similar to the Dragon Prince. And I think this art style it's not great on some facial features, I think. But for everything else, it's amazing. Like the level of detail. Amazing, yeah. Oh my God, the action looks so good. And the level of detail they can put into it. And what they can do with lighting is incredibly impressive on this. I think for most people it's going to take a little getting used to, but I love watching footage of Breath of the Wild on the Switch. I love Dragon Prince. I think this is going to be a cool addition to another look to add into this world. So I like the 3D animation of Clone Wars and Rebels. I also remember how long it took for Clone Wars to start looking a little bit better as they created more assets that they could reuse, as they got more budget over time. And the same was true for Rebels as well. And I don't think people understand that process as much, that that how well this looks already from the get-go, and what that means for what this is going to look like by the end of season 1 or in season 2 is just it's going to be incredible. The art already is so good. I just can't wait to see how it goes. If it's not your thing, that's fine. I get it. Not everything's for everybody, but I think there are a lot of people who are glossing over the level of quality that is in this, already put into this.
Yeah, I agree. It's just it's a different style of animation, but it's not a lower quality. I've heard a couple critiques about like people saying, they're just cutting budgets and just trying to make as much money out of this as they can. And
it's just not in
simply
any
not
way.
True. Yeah, simply not true.
Not at all.
Simply not true.
So, well, that's it for today's episode, A Certain Point of View. Let us know what you think, what you're excited for in the Star Wars universe, what you're not excited for, what you could use a little bit more of. You can let us know on our variety of social media. That's all available on our website, certainpov.com. You can find all that there. And if you want to be a part of what we do on the podcast and, help us get that Oculus Quest, you can be a patron as well. Like, we'll use
shameless, Addy. Absolutely shameless.
I kind of want that Oculus Quest. And we still haven't gotten that lightsaber challenges game yet. That's only $200.
True. I know.
I got close to buying it, but I also got close to buying a Switch as well, and I need to be disciplined on that and not get those just yet. So, but if you want our help Addy get a Switch, no. If you want to see more content from us, that's really what it's about.
Go. That's really
trust
what
me,
it's about.
Yeah, because we want to produce a whole lot more stuff. We'll get the VR stuff on our own money, or maybe if we make good with Lucasfilm, maybe they'll help us out. But we would love to create more podcasts. We always have ideas for more shows. Trust me, we got ideas for another 4 shows right now that we love to produce. And if you would love to see more shows from us, the only way we can really do that is if we can kind of transition more of our time into these podcasts, which isn't really possible if we're doing it on our own money. So if you'd like to be a part of that, you can be a patron, and you can do that by going to our website, certainpov.com, and clicking on support and clicking on Patreon. Any level of giving would be appreciated. We're doing a few exclusives here and there, and I'm sure as time goes on, we'd like to offer more to give back to you guys. But you can find out about that on our website, certainpov.com. Until next time, though, stay scruffy, my nerf herder.